Welcome to a deep dive. We're diving into I Will Teach You to Be Rich by Ramit Sethi. Getting ready for this, I gotta say I got really into it. We're going way deeper than your average book summary.
Mm.
Think of it like a masterclass in Sethi's system for a rich life.
It's about so much more than just the tactics, It's the whole mindset shift that makes this book so powerful. So we'll be unpacking not just the what, but the why behind his approach and how it kind of throws a wrench into a lot of that traditional personal finance advice you hear all the time.
All right, let's jump right in. Sethi starts off with this question, and it really got my attention. Would you rather be sexy or rich? Now, before you think this is just some random comparison, he uses it to make a really clever point. He compares obsessing over, all the tiny details of investing to those fad diets we all love to hate. It's that same promise of a quick fix.
It's the trap of complexity, right? It's just like people jump from one fad diet to the next, hoping for that magic solution. So many people approach personal finance the exact same way. But Sethi's argument is that the basics are actually surprisingly simple.
It's all about consistent action over time. That's what really gets you results.
It's like he says in the book, arguing about interest rates when you're just starting out is it's like kids in elementary school playing tennis and obsessing over their string tension. You're missing the point. You got to get out there and actually play.
That's it. That's what sets Sethi apart. He's all about building a system that works for you. He calls them big wins, those strategic moves that automate your finances so you can, free up your mind for other things. And remember, just getting started is way more important than trying to become a financial expert overnight.
It's so true. And he doesn't shy away from the reasons why people have such a hard time managing money. He lists a whole bunch of excuses. But the one that really resonated with me was that info glut paradox. When you've got so much financial information coming at you from every direction that you just end up frozen. Too much information, can't make a decision. Ever been there?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Information overload is a real struggle when it comes to personal finance.
Yeah.
But Sethi's point is that we need to move past that victim mindset. We have to take responsibility, take ownership of our finances. He doesn't believe in waiting for the perfect time or having all the answers before doing anything.
And that's where he shares this incredible story about the Save $1,000 in 30 Days challenge. It's amazing. Some people were actually arguing with him, saying it was impossible for them.
It really shows you how our brains work, doesn't it? We
Yeah.
tend to get stuck on all the reasons why we can't do something, all our limitations. But Sethi's challenge highlights something crucial. Even small actions, if you do them consistently, can really build momentum. Makes me think of that saying, a journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step. This leads us to one of Sethi's big philosophies, the 85% solution. It's the idea that it's better to just dive in and aim for getting things 85% right than to sit around trying to be perfect and never starting at all.
That one really hit home for me. You see, I used to be a total perfectionist when it came to my finances. I'd spend hours and hours researching the best investing strategy, the perfect budget spreadsheet. But I would just get overwhelmed with all the options and end up making no progress at all. But once I embraced that 85% principle, it was like a weight off my shoulders. I could finally take action, knowing I could always adjust and tweak things as I went along.
So it's about progress over perfection, right? Like the idea of launching a product and then making changes based on feedback. It's way more effective than trying to make the perfect product right out the gate. And that ties into another one of Sethi's key ideas, automating your finances so everything runs on autopilot. But before we get into that, let's talk about how he views spending money. He calls it conscious spending, right?
Exactly. And this isn't about depriving yourself either. It's more about aligning your spending with what's actually important to you. Sethi believes you can spend a lot on the things you truly love as long as you're being really careful about cutting costs on the things you don't.
Right. Like his friend Jim, who downsized his apartment to free up more money to spend on biking and camping.
Yeah.
That's conscious spending in action, living that rich life on his own terms. Okay, ready to jump into Chapter 1. Optimize your credit cards. Here we come.
I'm ready. This is where Sethi really turns some common beliefs about credit cards on their head. He wants us to see them as tools to be mastered, not something to be afraid of.
Love how he compares his upbringing to, the typical American aversion to negotiating. He tells this funny story about how his dad was relentless when it came to buying cars. He'd always push for the absolute best deal. It's a great example of the power of negotiation, even if it feels awkward at first.
Yeah, it makes you question those assumptions about what's okay. And get this, even Sethi, with his amazing credit score, actually got penalized when he bought a car because he didn't have enough different sources of credit. It's a good reminder that a good credit score is just one part of the picture.
Exactly. And we need to understand that there's a difference between a credit report and a credit score. Think of your credit report like a detailed history of all your credit activity. Your credit score, on the other hand, is just a three-digit number, a summary of your credit worthiness. They're both important, but they're used for different things.
That's right. Lenders use your credit report to get a sense of your payment history, how much of your available credit you're using, things like that. It basically shows them if you're responsible with money. Your credit score is more of a quick snapshot that lenders use to assess how risky it is to lend to you. So even if you have a good credit score, really understanding what's on your credit report can help you make smarter financial decisions.
Now, Sethi doesn't shy away from the downsides of credit cards either. He shows you how those hidden costs of financing can really add up, and how even small purchases can turn into a lot of debt if you're only making the minimum payments.
And he uses some pretty shocking examples to show how fast those interest charges can pile up. Like, imagine you buy a $1,000 TV, right? If you only pay the minimum each month, you could end up paying twice as much, maybe even 3 times the original price.
Makes you really think about those interest rates and how important it is to pay your balance down as quickly as possible. And when it comes to those reward cards, Sethi really emphasizes choosing wisely. You got to watch out for those tempting retail store cards. Often they come with super high interest rates and really limited benefits.
Instead, he says, do your research. Find cards that match how you spend money and offer good rewards, like cashback or travel miles. It's about maximizing what you get while minimizing the costs.
Don't fall for that 10% off today trap. Okay, let's move on to chapter 2, Beat the Banks. I love this chapter. Sethi takes on those big financial institutions head on and shows us how to get the most out of our bank accounts.
You really see his fearless attitude in this chapter. He even got put on Bank of America's negative influencer list for calling out their practices. He's not afraid to hold these companies accountable and give people the tools to fight for their financial well-being.
Yeah, it's all about understanding the tactics banks use and, more importantly, how to negotiate fees and get the best terms for yourself.
He's all about shopping around for accounts that give you high interest but have low fees. And don't be afraid to ask for those fees to be waived. You can even negotiate for a better rate. You'd be surprised how much money you can save by just being proactive and standing up for yourself.
So true. He says it best. The squeaky wheel gets the grease. Okay, are you ready for the world of investing? Chapter 3, Get Ready to Invest.
Let's do it. This is where Sethi breaks down investing and makes it clear that anyone can start, even if you don't have much money. He lays out a roadmap, a clear plan, starting with building a solid foundation using a 401k and a Roth IRA.
I love how he takes these really complicated topics and turns them into simple, actionable steps. He uses this great analogy of a ladder of personal finance. Each rung on the ladder is a different financial goal, and he really pushes for starting with the steps that have the biggest impact, like taking full advantage of those employer-sponsored retirement plans and maximizing tax-advantaged accounts.
It's about focusing on those big wins, the ones that set you up for long-term financial success. He also busts that myth that you need a ton of money to get started with investing. He shares some eye-opening stats that show if you start early, even small contributions can really grow into a significant amount over time. It's the beauty of compound interest.
Yeah, he uses the story of Smart Sally, who starts investing just $1,000 a year at age 25. By the time she's 65, she's got over $1 million. But dumb Dan, he waits until he's 35, and even though he invests more overall, he ends up with a lot less.
Okay.
It really drives home the point that time is your most valuable asset when it comes to investing.
It's not about trying to predict the perfect moment to invest. It's about getting your money in the market and letting it grow. Now, let's talk about those different types of retirement accounts. Sethi does a great job of explaining what each one is and highlighting the benefits.
I know I was totally confused about 401ks and Roth IRAs before I read this book. So a 401k is a retirement savings plan that your employer sponsors, and your contributions are tax deferred. That means you don't pay taxes on the money until you take it out in retirement.
Got it.
Got it. And then there's the Roth IRA. It's an individual retirement account where you put in money you've already paid taxes on. But the great thing is your earnings grow tax-free, and you don't have to pay taxes when you withdraw the money in retirement if you follow the rules.
Yeah.
So it's all about choosing the account that makes the most sense for your situation and getting the most out of those tax advantages. That whole chapter was a game changer. Investing finally felt approachable, not so intimidating. Okay, let's move on to chapter 4, where Sethi goes deeper into conscious spending. What are your thoughts on that idea?
I think it's such a clever way to reframe how we think about money. It's not about feeling deprived or guilty about spending. It's about making sure your spending matches your values and what's truly important to you. Sethi believes that you can spend freely on things you really love as long as you're strict about cutting costs on stuff that doesn't matter as much.
So it's all about being intentional, right?
Yeah,
Making choices that support your rich life vision.
exactly. Like Sethi's friend who spends $21,000 a year going out to dinners and events, he doesn't feel guilty about it at all because he's carefully saving money in other areas. He's not depriving himself. He's just making choices that line up with what he values and enjoys.
It's a powerful reminder that you can be financially responsible and still have a great time.
Welcome back. As we keep going with I Will Teach You to Be Rich, there's something Sethi brings up over and over that I really want to highlight. Knowing stuff isn't enough. You got to take action. It's not just about understanding these concepts. You got to actually use them in your life.
He really practices what he preaches, doesn't he?
Hmm.
Remember how he got started in all this? Won that scholarship, invested it, and boom, lost half his money. But that experience made him so passionate about learning personal finance. And that ultimately led him to create this amazing book that helps so many people.
Right. He took a failure and turned it into a huge learning experience. It's like a great example for all of us. We can all learn from our mistakes and use them as motivation to reach our goals. And it emphasizes another big idea in the book. Don't be afraid to question assumptions. Sethi's always pushing us to challenge those accepted ideas, whether it's about credit cards, investing, or even those so-called financial experts.
I've always been a little skeptical of those get-rich-quick schemes.
Hmm.
All those financial gurus promising these crazy returns. Sethi's approach is so refreshing. He's all about being transparent, being practical, and giving people the power to manage their own money.
It's not about some magic formula. It's a system, something anyone can do, no matter how much you make or what your background is. And this brings us back to automation, one of his most powerful, big wins. The idea of setting up your finances so they just run on autopilot, it makes saving and investing so much easier.
That's one area where I've seen the biggest difference in my own life. Once I set up those automatic transfers to my savings and investment accounts, it was like money was just growing magically without me even having to think about it.
Totally. You're harnessing the power of defaults. By automating those key financial tasks, you're picking the easiest path when it comes to handling your money.
And let's be real, who doesn't like making things simpler? It's like setting up a recurring order for your favorite coffee beans. You don't have to worry about it. It just shows up at your door, and you can enjoy your coffee without any hassle.
Perfect analogy. Okay, shifting gears a bit, Sethi spends a whole chapter digging into the psychology of money, those invisible money scripts that can really hold us back from reaching our goals.
This is huge. It's understanding how those deep-seated beliefs we have about money, the ones we often develop as kids, can shape how we act with money, even when we don't realize it.
Imagine, you always feel guilty spending money on yourself, even for basic things you need. That could be a money script from your childhood. That voice telling you money is only for essentials and anything you spend on yourself is just wasteful.
Or maybe you're always chasing the next big purchase. But then you finally get it and you just feel empty. That could be a script that connects happiness to buying stuff, which we see all the time in our culture.
These scripts can be so powerful and we're often totally unaware of them. Sethi wants us to learn to recognize them and then challenge them so we can change our relationship with money for the better.
It's like becoming aware of those negative thoughts, those limiting beliefs, and choosing to replace them with more positive, empowering ones. Now, let's switch to Chapter 8. Invest like a millionaire. I always find it fascinating to hear how those really successful investors approach the market. What are some of Sethi's big ideas there?
He's a big fan of keeping things simple and focusing on long-term strategies. He believes in a hands-off approach, aiming for slow and steady growth. He really likes index funds. He argues that they're a cheap, diversified way to get in on the market's overall returns.
He even says investing can be boring, which I think surprises a lot of people. They imagine it's all like high-stakes Wall Street stuff.
That's his point exactly. It's not about trying to outsmart the market or pick the next hot stock. It's about putting together a diversified portfolio that lines up with how much risk you're comfortable with and what your goals are.
And then let that compound interest work its magic.
Oh.
He also talks about asset allocation and rebalancing, two things that a lot of people get tripped up on.
Right. Asset allocation is figuring out how to divide your money among different types of investments. Things like stocks, bonds, real estate. It's all about creating a balanced portfolio that matches your risk tolerance and your goals.
For example, let's say you're young and you've got a lot of time before you need to use the money. You might choose to put more of your portfolio into stocks. They tend to offer higher returns, but they can be more volatile.
But if you're closer to retirement, not as much time, you might want to put more into bonds. They usually have lower returns, but they're generally considered less risky. It's all about finding what's right for you.
And then there's rebalancing. It's making sure that your portfolio stays aligned with your target asset allocation as the market changes over time.
Exactly. As time goes on, your investments might start to stray from that initial plan. Some investments will do better than others. Rebalancing is when you basically sell some of those investments that are doing really well and use that money to buy more of the ones that aren't doing as well. That way, your portfolio stays balanced.
So it's about maintaining that ideal mix of investments and managing risk over time. Now, one question that comes up a lot with investing is, when is the right time to sell? What does Sethi say about that?
He's pretty clear that trying to time the market is a bad idea. Predicting those ups and downs is really tough, even for the professionals. He recommends a more disciplined approach. Stick with your plan. Don't let your emotions get in the way.
It's about focusing on the long game, not freaking out when there are short-term changes in the market.
He also reminds us that markets go up and down. That's natural. Instead of panicking and selling everything when things go down, he suggests looking at it as a chance to buy more.
So it's about having the guts to stick with your strategy and believe in the power of investing for the long term. I know a lot of people just avoid investing altogether because they feel like they don't know enough or they're too worried about losing money. What does Sethi say to them?
He gets it. Those fears are real. But he argues they shouldn't prevent you from building wealth, he says. Learn about investing, find trustworthy sources, and start small.
He emphasizes that investing is a journey, not a quick win. We can all learn and get better as we go. Now, I'm really interested in Chapter 9, A Rich Life. I'm curious how Sethi defines a truly rich life. It's got to be about more than just money, right?
This chapter really expands on the idea of making your money work for the life you want. A rich life, it's not just about having tons of money, it's about designing a life that's truly fulfilling, a life with meaning and purpose.
It's about using what you have, your resources, to create a life that's a reflection of you, your passions, your values, your goals.
He gives you practical advice on all sorts of topics, everything from negotiating a better salary to handling those student loans, buying a house, and even talking about finances in your relationships.
He encourages us to make a spending plan that's tailored to our own priorities and values. It's not about blindly following some generic rulebook. And he reminds us that it's okay to spend freely on the things that truly make us happy, as long as we're keeping our bigger financial goals in mind.
He told these really inspiring stories about people who are living rich lives on their own terms, traveling the world, being creative, building businesses that make a difference.
It's all about finding that perfect balance where your finances actually support the kind of life you want to live, instead of feeling like they're holding you back. Now, before we move on, I want to touch on one of Sethi's best pieces of advice. He says, spend extravagantly on the things you love and cut costs mercilessly on the things you don't.
Such a great quote. It reminds us that you don't have to live like a monk to be good with money. It's about making conscious choices. Spend on the things that matter. Cut back on the things that don't.
It's about finding joy in the things that are truly important to you and not feeling bad about spending your money on those things. Okay, before we wrap up this part, let's take a minute to think about what we've learned so far.
We've covered a lot of ground. We've talked about the psychology of money, how our minds work with money, setting up those systems to automate our finances. We've looked at Sethi's approach to investing, keeping it simple, focusing on the long term, understanding how compound interest can really work for you.
And we've really dug into his definition of a rich life, going way beyond just the numbers in your bank account. It's about living a life that's meaningful, satisfying, and aligned with what's important to you.
We've talked about the power of taking action, questioning assumptions, and embracing that 85% solution. Now, in the last part of our deep dive, we'll get into Sethi's advice on dealing with debt, how to be a good negotiator, and creating a financial roadmap for your future.
We'll also leave you with some questions to think about as you start your own journey towards that rich life. Ready to keep going? All right, welcome back to the deep dive. As we wrap up our look at I Will Teach You to Be Rich, I want to get into something that I think a lot of people struggle with: debt. It's a reality for so many of us. But Sethi has this, really refreshing and positive way of looking at it, like a challenge you can overcome.
He's honest about how tough it can be, but he's firm that it's not a forever thing. He gives you a clearer path out, starting with figuring out exactly how much you owe and making a plan to pay it off strategically.
He's big on being honest with yourself about your finances, taking ownership, but he's also, really compassionate. It's not about beating yourself up over it. It's about taking charge and creating a plan for a better financial future.
Right, he says. Start by listing out all your debts, every single one: credit cards, student loans, personal loans, everything. Then he walks you through how to prioritize them, usually going after the ones with the highest interest rates first.
He's all about negotiating with those lenders too. See if you can get a lower interest rate, maybe work out a better payment plan. He reminds us that lenders are often willing to work with borrowers, especially if you're proactive, and show them you're serious about paying back what you owe.
He even gives you scripts, like word for word what to say, so you can feel confident standing up for yourself. You might be surprised how much money you can save in interest just by doing that. He also encourages us to look at how we're spending money and see where we can cut back so we have more cash to throw at those debts.
It's about making smart choices, right? Getting that debt paid off so you can be financially free and open up more possibilities. Before we move on, I want to mention something Sethi says that's really stuck with me. Negotiate everything.
That's classic Sethi, right? He totally believes that being a good negotiator is a key life skill. It can help you in so many ways: get better deals, make more money, create more opportunities. He thinks a lot of us miss out on potential savings or extra income simply because we don't ask.
Yeah, it's about pushing past that fear and embracing negotiation, using it as a way to get what you want to achieve your goals. He gives tons of examples from his own life, like how he's negotiated everything, from his rent and his cable bill to his salary and his freelance rates.
And he breaks it down, gives you practical tips for going into those negotiations feeling confident, being prepared, and finding solutions that work for everyone. He even provides scripts for different situations so you can step outside that comfort zone and start asking for what you deserve.
It's about changing your mindset, right? Seeing negotiation not as some kind of battle, but as a way to work together, collaborate, and come up with win-win solutions. Okay, as we wrap up our deep dive into I Will Teach You to Be Rich, I want to come back to Sethi's big idea of a rich life. What does that really mean to you?
To me, it's about making sure my money supports the things I believe in and using my resources to build a life that's truly fulfilling, a life that has meaning, lines up with my purpose. It's not about hoarding wealth, it's about having a life filled with experiences, relationships, and personal growth.
It's about creating a life that's uniquely you, reflects your passions, what you prioritize, your own definition of success. Sethi reminds us that there's no one-size-fits-all rich life. It's a journey, and it's personal.
He wants us to figure out what a rich life looks like for each of us, not just in terms of money, but in terms of what makes us happy. He asks those questions that make you think, like what brings you joy? What relationships are most important to you? How do you really want to spend your time and your money?
It's about designing a life that feels authentically yours, a life that gives you purpose, joy, and a sense of fulfillment. Okay, as we finish up, I want to leave you with something to think about, a question, as you begin your own journey towards that rich life. What's one small step you can take today to move closer to that vision?
Maybe it's setting up that automatic transfer to your savings account, finally making that budget you've been putting off. Or maybe it's picking up the phone, calling your credit card company, and trying to negotiate a lower interest rate. Or even just sitting down with your partner and having an honest conversation about your financial goals.
Don't forget, even small steps, if you keep taking them, can add up to huge changes over time. It's about building momentum, creating good habits, and staying committed to your financial well-being.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into I Will Teach You to Be Rich. I hope you've picked up some valuable tips and that you feel inspired to take control of your finances and design a life you love.
That's it for this deep dive. Keep learning, keep growing, and keep exploring the knowledge that empowers you to create your own rich life.